successful corporate career? How do I still keep my marriage intact? How do I do not kill my kids, especially if I have twins? This is the meetup for you tonight. So we have Brother Stephen Sewell, okay. So we'll get into exactly how he got started. We'll get into how he put his team in place to be successful, to renovate, build, and rent, not only in this market, but in other markets also. So I want everybody to put your hands together because we want to get as much of your story out as possible tonight. For Stephen Sewell. So Stephen, how did you even get started in the real estate business?
Yeah. First off, it's kind of crazy to be in this seat. I've been in that seat so many times, and I feel like I'm probably not the most qualified person to be here, but I kind of started the same way most people do. You kind of looking to figure out a place where you put your money to put it to work for you. So I started, I finished grad school in 2013, moved down here for the BP oil spill settlement, actually. So, being close to downtown, I always heard about the sheriff's auction that was going on. And that always seemed like a more enticing entry point into real estate because going on the MLS was always a little overwhelming. And then, wholesalers at the time, I was like, what the hell are you trying to sell me? I don't, I don't have an inspection period. I got to do earnest money. Like, it was always kind of overwhelming. So I just went, followed the Bigger Pockets crew for a while to kind of get acclimated to what I was talking about and what I needed to look for. And then I just went and sat in these auctions and just watched the people, you get a list of the properties, you kind of see what they're looking at. I didn't know how they were looking at 30 different properties and not being able to enter the property and still confidently putting bids down. But, I kind of watched. And then after I kind of got the flow and felt like I wasn't, the new kid on the block, I would start going and trying to run my own calculations based on nothing. I didn't know how to flip. I didn't know what the price per square foot of installing new flooring was. Windows were, a mystery, but I tried to kind of understand what people were bidding on, and I just would go week after week because it was across the street from where I worked, and try to understand the process, talk to some of the people that were doing it, and just immerse myself enough to where it wasn't as foreign as it could have been. Because I'd probably been where a lot of people start out as you read, you watch videos, you follow the industry, and you're like, okay, I don't think I'm still confident enough. You never have that confidence to take that step. And then there's also the capital price to get involved and play in the game. So I reached out to a buddy of mine who I knew had a little bit of walking around money, and was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. We don't have kids. Let's just try this and see what happens. So we started actively bidding on properties, and I knew nothing. Again, we'd set our number, we're going to bid $60,000 on this property, and it'd get up to 110. We're like, shit, might as well go take it to the MLS or watch another video, try to get caught up. But one day, week after week, we would kind of do this, and we would just keep running our numbers and practicing. And finally, we got this dump. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath double, so 2 1-1s in an 800 square foot property over Fontainebleau, Broadmoor area, Pritchard Place. We kind of went in there with our number, like 70 is our max. And I kind of just let emotion take over, and we got it at 85, which was like, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we were in the game. So got traditional financing on it, thanks to FABT. And, really it was like the best possible experiment with not a whole lot to lose. It was a great area, but it needed everything. And, when I talk about everything, I mean everything. We gutted that thing to the studs and, went through way too much analysis and way too much. What I've come to learn now is that, you don't need to micromanage each aspect of a flip. Like, I was on Facebook Marketplace hustling for used sinks. I was going there for doors that people were throwing away. I was trying to find any which way I could to save a buck. And, at the time, we were trying to do a lot of the things ourselves. We didn't know what we were doing. I still don't know what I'm doing on a lot of stuff today, but It was an awesome experiment that took us like 6 to 7 months to get it together. A lot of headache, but learned a ton. Got to know contractors. What I found out was, like, when I was reading all these articles before I had skin in the game, I would come to contractors or lenders and be like, "This is what I want to do," and they would say, "Well, have you done it?" "No." "Do you have anything you want to bring to us? A deal?" "No." "Well, we'll see you later."
Right.
So to have something and to kind of learn with my hands on gave me a lot of confidence to kind of keep moving that forward. So we did really well on that deal, thankfully. I think we bought it for 85, sold it for 240. So, like, right away, I was just like, "Oh, what can I do now?" We took that money, we split it as we did, and then I rolled it over into the next flip, which was a HUD house, and then I kind of just kept rolling from there.
Yeah. For the people that consider using the auction as kind of their entry level, what is that experience like? So when you win the auction, you put down a deposit, the title work. Kind of walk us through what that's like once you won that bid for the first time for the $85,000.
Yeah. So generally they'll release, I think, up to a couple weeks, maybe a month.
And
or
what
so.
parish? I'm sorry.
Orleans Parish.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I know each parish is different. That's a good point. And then there's different requirements financially, which you have to bring to the table. Sometimes you have to pay for all of it. But Orleans, it was 10%. And then you had 30.
At the auction, 10%?
At day of auction, and then you had 30 days to finance the rest. So you'd have to bring cashier's checks to get the property at the time. So I'd always keep, like, increments of like 5,000 in like my work bag, which I looked like a psycho doing because I'd go at lunch. It was always at 12 o'clock, so I'd take my lunch break. But so you get the list of properties on the front end of 15 that they're going to go to auction that week. Maybe 5 make it that far. But you got to be quick because, like, there's properties that are going to, there's 15 properties, maybe 4 of them are in your buy box or the areas you want to go in. And then some of those will get pulled off the market at the end. So you go there and it's only 1 or 2 properties. So it's like it sounds. It's an auction. They'll, you kind of bid on the property. Highest bid wins in most cases. You've got some bankers that are there trying to outbid. So it's an exhilarating kind of time. But even when I went there not to bid, it was just to observe and see, like, the chaos that you're buying a house. Like, this is not Monopoly. You're actually, like, purchasing properties, and people are shouting like it's nothing. So it's an exhilarating process. Then you go in, you sign all the paperwork. You leave there with a piece of paper and a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
But it was good. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about Orleans Parish, but they do the auctions very well. So it was awesome.
Good stuff. Tell us about the due diligence before we get to that next flip. So with that $85,000 property, did you even get a chance to get inside, break the windows, crawl in? How did you guys do your due diligence?
On the record.
Yeah.
Off the record, I'll tell you. But a lot of these properties are abandoned, vacant, blighted. And you can get a pretty good understanding of what you're walking into. So, kind of drive by once or twice. A lot of, like, observation. I'd talk to some neighbors if I was really serious about a property. In that particular property, it was clearly abandoned long ago. Crawled in under the pier and beams just to see what was going on underneath.
Yeah.
Peered in through the windows, just literal poop all over the place. It was nasty stuff. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you're taking a guess and you're playing the square footage game, comps to see what the area looks like, how it's done in the last couple of years. But it is a gamble. You don't have that inspection period, so you kind of have to find any which way you can.
Yep. You used the word confidence. So for the people that are in, analysis paralysis right now, can you kind of put your finger on exactly what gave you and your friend the confidence to actually pull the trigger and say, today, this is the day that we'll buy?
There wasn't anything about that property that we were like, this is it. It was just like probably my 13th time doing it, and I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going for it.
Yeah.
And we had our range of what we thought was acceptable. And, I'm sitting there with a little earpiece in saying, like, all right, it's at 81, 81, 81.5, 81, 81.6. What do you want to do? What do you do?
Yeah.
And just kind of, like, felt it, We knew what we could get. And, again, you also now I know this. I didn't know it at the time. I don't want to act like I knew everything, but you also want to know what the level of rehab you're aiming for and what the area calls for. So are you going to go with a medium rehab? Are you going to go with like a full scale, like a deluxe? Who's your client and what are they looking for? So we knew what our range was, and based on our acquisition price would kind of determine how much money we put into it. It was a learning process. So like, we kind of went into it where if we miss and we lose, we're okay. It's going to hurt, but it's not going to cripple us. And that's, I guess, part of being young and taking risks. So like, it wasn't going to, it'd have probably been at most been like $5-10 grand loss, but ended up being a pretty big win.
Yeah. And kind of focus, what year are we talking right now?
2018.
2018. Okay, good. So this is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
For sure,
Oh, yeah.
a little bit. Okay. So lessons learned from this first flip, what were they? And tell us about the next deal following that, the HUD house. So what did you take away from this auction house and rolled into this next one?
I'd say some of the big lessons learned were like not to micromanage contractors was a big one. Like I would try to get quotes and bids on each individual scope and try to like say, well, this guy did this. And oftentimes like I'm a first time investor. I'm a first time renovator. I don't have any bargaining power in this. I'm just some punk kid that won an auction, So being able to kind of like bid out larger pieces of a project and kind of trust the process and not sit there with, the blue painter's tape and show exactly what they did wrong, because I don't really know. I don't know what all goes into it. And then trying to do a lot of it on my own, especially with no real true background. We spent lots of time, rework, made a lot of mistakes that probably cost us money. Another big piece of it is make good with the neighbors around you, because they're going to be having to deal with that dumpster out front. They're going to be having to deal with, some of the contractors double parking and blocking their driveway. You might not have your water turned on. You got to borrow their water. So be overly nice with trying to, give them a little present to say thank you. Just treat everybody around you as if like they're your client. So kind of go with it. And then, I think getting that first experience showed me what I'm good at, which is managing the financial side, managing the project, and not necessarily the work being done as part of that scope. So, I learned a lot about what flooring should go where, outlet placement, elevation of foundation issues, pier and beam versus slab. There's a lot that you kind of take away from that, and then you just build upon. No one knows everything, so I just needed something to kind of start the foundation. So I took a lot of that. The contractors that I made are still people I use. The lenders, going through the traditional finance route, like thankfully I had some good contacts that like kind of guided me. I just kind of kept that rolling. You find what doesn't work and then you adjust, but the horse that's going to stay with you the whole time and is consistent and does what they say they're going to do, ride that. Like don't try to go to the lowest bid all the time. That'll end up biting you in the ass.
Yeah. And by trade, what's your background? Are you taking some of this from your background, or this was just completely trial and error?
Finance and consulting. I'm not the typical blue collar person at all. And I think that kind of hurt me quite a bit, because I thought I knew what I was doing, and I got humbled very, very quickly. We wanted to tear up all these crappy sidewalks on that. We're just still talking about that property, but tear up these sidewalks and come back with gravel. And, me and my buddy, young bucks, thinking we could handle that. Like I was icing my back for 3 days, with a wheelbarrow.
You broke up the concrete.
Yeah. We rented jackhammer. Again, it's like, it took us 4 days to do it when another crew with 3 guys could have done it in a day. And, these additions to your scope add to your holding costs, add to the finished project. They're going to have to come and fix what you did to begin with. So being able to not think you're missing out on a dollar and just focus on the path of efficiency and getting it done the first time correctly.
Yeah. So what's the story on this next deal? Because you sound like you went into this one with way more experience. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, I found a HUD house that was in Gentilly, was the next deal off of Cameron Boulevard. It had been on the market for a long time. And again, this deal plus most of our deals, they all need a good bit of work. That's kind of where we always go after. it didn't need a whole lot. The foundation was solid, but it just needed a big reorganization of the layout. A lot of like electrical swap outs and moving the kitchen from one room to another was a big task. But again, early on, it was about like, if I can do the most work with purchasing correctly on the front end, there's a lot of meat on that bone afterwards. So if I make a mistake, there's some cushion there to catch me. Mm-hmm. And the market at that time was still pretty favorable. So I wasn't as worried about a property sitting on the market for 2 to 3 months as I would be, with similar situations nowadays. So you kind of use what you have to your advantage. You leverage the relationships that are there, and you kind of rinse and repeat.
And this is still 2018, a second deal?
This would have been early 2019. Yeah.
Okay. And you're still working, right? So you're still working downtown at this time?
I've been W-2, different jobs, but I am not the person that's going to tell you to quit your job and find real estate or do 20 deals at a time, get 10K of cash flow. Like, I am very risk adverse when it comes to real estate. I'm very slow and steady. So, at the beginning it was flip a couple, buy a rental,
Mm-hmm.
and that was always the process.
Gotcha. So this second deal ended up being a flip or a rental?
A flip.
Okay. Talk to us about while you were working, especially early on, while you were still building your team. What was that experience like with trying to run a project and still being 100% at work and trying to be all in with this project to make sure nothing goes wrong?
Yeah.
Either. What was that team building process like?
Yeah. I mean, your peers and your boss is going to know if you're slacking off. So it's a lot of weekends, a lot of, nights, early mornings, dropping off materials at the site, meeting a contractor on a lunch break to kind of like make sure you're going over the punch list correctly. A lot of leveraging my wife to help me kind of like keep people in line, keep us in line, making sure we're right with the bank to get our draw schedules, making sure, a little QA check on all the work that's being done. But you kind of have to trust. You can't just rely on yourself to do a lot of that. So, don't make as much money as if I were doing it myself, GCing, but, to maintain my sanity, my life, and my wife, just you gotta have to lose a little bit to gain a little bit.
Okay. And as far as your vetting process, so it sounds like having the right people on the team makes the business a little less stressful. So what was that vetting process like? Trying, especially with contractors, how did you burn through them to kind of vet them out to get that horse that you're riding on right now?
Yeah. Well, the early days, like I said, we were very like micromanaging on scopes. So it'd be like, you do the flooring, you do the drywall. So we got to like, the downside is that you piss a lot of people off, but you get to see like who's really like doing what they say they're going to do and shows up and will come back and fix issues without any complaints. Labor was so easy to find. It still is, but you kind of just have to like network a little bit, ask for referrals from friends, and then like give them a shot. It was really trial and error. You lean on your recommendations, but the same guy that we used for our first flip is the same guy that still does a lot of our big CapEx work today. So, I have like, if it's HVAC, there's 2 or 3 people that I'll call, usually in an order. If there's small handyman stuff, I'll have 2 or 3 people. But a lot of these people can do different things, but you want to try to make sure that I'm giving them, and I am not a big volume person, so as much volume as I have to offer, I can give it. So you kind of just keep them fed as much as you can.
Yeah. You mentioned the full-time people or the gurus that may say, kicking 9 to 5 to the side. What's been some of the benefits that you've experienced so far by still keeping a job and scaling your real estate business? That the full-time person or the person thinking about quitting, those options might be taken off of the table.
I mean, there's a safety blanket there that is a steady paycheck. You can't beat that. You got the insurance and the benefits that come with a 9 to 5. But on the rental side, which is where we've kind of mostly focused recently, you've got your depreciation. The tax benefits are, really awesome. You get to write off quite a bit each year on each property. So that brings down your taxable income, which is always kind of our goal. Being able to kind of focus more on the rentals doesn't require a whole lot of hands-on stuff, especially if you develop those relationships with property managers and really building relationships with your tenants is been a huge side on us for like very little vacancies, and then giving tenants honestly chances to do a lot of the repairs themselves and kind of help them financially too. But you have to rely on other people because you have your W-2, you have your 9 to 5 that you're doing. So it's really not an option. I can't just like leave whenever I want to go do something. I have to be very mindful of my time and my focus. So, letting other people who are way more experienced and better at their particular scopes and skills handle it and make sure you take care of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits, but I think knowing that I have a backup plan in case shit hits the fan, that's probably the best part about it, but the tax benefits for sure.
So tell us about deal flow, right? So for the person that thinks, if I'm doing this full time, I can network with more wholesalers, or I could be on MLS, or I could do more driving for dollars. So how do you keep your pipeline full with deals to look through to make sure that these are the ones that you actually want to add to your pipeline? What is that like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of volume like long term. I've been adding slowly as we go. I think at our cap we had 14 doors, but maybe not this last year, but up until 2022, 2023, we were very 2 to 3 flips a year plus 1 or 2 rentals. That was like our strategy. So I would develop pretty good relationships with specific wholesalers early in 2018, 2019 that I still am very close with them today. I don't know if some of y'all know Carl Finero. He's been a big help in what we've done. But kind of just making sure you check in with them because, again, I'm not buying at volume, so I don't have I'm not getting first peaks or first dibs on deals. So it's trying to get to know wholesalers, agents that specify or have a lot of experience on the real estate investment side, making sure that you're always kind of top of mind, just checking in quite a bit. And then truly running my numbers. I mean, that I cannot preach that enough, being able to underwrite deals, but sharing my information with wholesalers, with other investors and be like, here's what I'm seeing. I don't think I could do this deal and I don't want to waste your time because here are my numbers, here are my hard lines, and I don't think it works. And I'm not going to lowball you with an offer just because it doesn't make sense. So let's put a pin in it and touch base the next time. So it's just networking and building relationships.
Yep. And how did you kind of flex that underwriting muscle, knowing that you didn't come from a contractor or real estate background? How did you develop that to even be confident enough to share your numbers with other people?
I'm an open book with sharing numbers. You want to see exactly what I'm looking at, I'll gladly show you. So, but it was that same kind of approach with mentors and people that didn't even know they were my mentors. They were active in the industry and be like, hey, what are you getting a new roof for? What is your price for install on flooring? And just kind of understanding what your end product is, like we talked about. Like, are you going for a high end? Are you going for wholesale? Are you going for something in between? You got to know the neighborhood and your comps, and then kind of develop very high level price per square foot is the easiest way to do it, based on the type of area you're going after. And then using some of those early projects to kind of hone in on your numbers and your craft, and then constantly readjust, because what I pay for a roof today is not what I paid for 2 years ago. And that you've got to kind of adjust your numbers accordingly. And so I'll send my numbers to some of my contractors and just be like, hey, am I just making sure I'm on the right page? I don't want to get caught off guard, and I don't want you to feel like I'm undercutting you. I want to make sure we're doing this together. So I share my numbers with sellers, with wholesalers, with contractors, because I want them to know that I'm not trying to squeeze them for every dollar. I want every one of us to do well on this deal. So it's experience and just checking in and trusting the people you're checking in with.
Yeah. So even though you have built a pretty tight team, what's still some of the challenges, even though the risk might be reduced, but what's still some of the challenges or bottlenecks you're still running into, especially on the construction side, that you kind of still trying to overcome?
Well, because I don't have the volume that some people do, I am not the first priority often on projects. So if they're working another 2 jobs, like I don't jump the line because I now have a job, even if I try to pay them a little more. So that preferential labor is tough to beat. It increases your holding costs quite a bit. You know, some of the people that I used have either moved or leave, and you got to kind of make new relationships, especially moving into new markets like we've been doing, establishing those relationships and trying to like not rise to the top, but like just be a name and a face that's out there in that world. Like I know a lot of people in the New Orleans market, but some of these other markets that we're in now, I'm the new person. I got to kind of do the whole thing over again, and labor changes based on availability and their preference to work with you. So, I mean, it's just getting to know your people and trusting it. But the availability of labor and getting things done on time is probably the biggest bottleneck we have. And then because I go the slow and steady route, there's always capital restrictions on how much money I have to throw at deals. So again, I'm not truly worried about that in the long term with my strategy.
Yeah. How has finance changed for you with financing projects from 2018, 2019 till now, especially leveraging the W-2? Is it a line of credit? Is it all cash from other flips? Is it cash flow from rentals? How's that dynamic with financing projects?
Yeah. So a lot of it is still the same. Like I know there's a lot of proponents of creative financing. I know there's a lot of proponents on you know, different ways to finance deals, but like that still scares the hell out of me. And I don't, that's not where I have invested the time to learn it, to lose those fears. So for most of the stuff I do is still traditional financing, or we have the cash to go after a deal based on cash out refinances or the selling of rentals to kind of build up our cash holdings. But a lot of it is still traditional financing, finding 30-year fixed rates, and kind of leveraging that and letting the property pay for itself over time.
And where you getting those most favorable terms? Is it just regular DSCR lenders? Is it local banks? Where you finding most success at to purchase and refi?
It depends on where we're buying. There's some local banks that we use here that won't lend in Arkansas or Mississippi, and then there's some like, you know, places based out of New Jersey or Florida that will offer pretty decent 30-year fixed, you know, no prepayment penalties. So we kind of shop around a little bit on the rates, just because now it's hard to find anything that's what was palatable. You know, the 4s, the 5s, the 6s for investments. Those days are gone. I don't know when they're coming back. So we try to shop around as best we can, but we'll always have like our 4 or 5 that we go to first.
Gotcha. So 2018, 2019, you do that first and second project. You kind of get in a rhythm, and we roll into 2020, which is COVID. How did that help or hurt the operation that you were building?
I mean, it didn't really hurt much. It was just weird times. I mean, everyone dealt with the same thing, but trying to see if I was even allowed to go meet contractors on site. We're all wearing masks. It's just super strange, but you know, there wasn't a lot of activity early in the days, so we would kind of just like sit around and, you know, just think about what we're going to do to enhance our, you know, our process, whether it's our rentals that we have on hand, making sure our tenants are set to, you know, financially, do they have the means to pay for you know, rent this month because their job is not there. I mean, we were very heavily focused on the rentals at that time. So we weren't too worried about like flips. I think we did 1 flip in 2020. But we kind of just focused on making sure our rentals were as good as they can, did a little bit of deferred maintenance, kind of just made sure that the portfolio as it was pretty strong.
Gotcha. And what has the experience been like with self-managing, especially still? Because in 2018, there was no family. Now, fast forward, You have a family, you have these projects, you have the job. So how are you managing your time with self-managing those rentals and making sure you're not losing your hair?
Yeah. We're about half and half on what we self-manage versus a property manager in place. And a lot of that has to do with location. So our stuff in Arkansas is all property manager. We have a Baton Rouge property manager for our properties there. Mississippi, we're currently self-managing because the second property management company went out of business. But honestly, it's treating everyone like they're your people. I know a lot of people try to hold hard lines with the tenants and make sure that there's a strict relationship there. But I mean, we do our best to really get to know them, find their struggles, and try to work with them. Like it's their house, it's our house. We're in this together. So the property management side really isn't that hard if you take that approach. Like our vacancy is next to none. We had a tenant pass away at the hospital, not in the property. But that's been our only vacancy in 2.5 years, 3 years probably. So, it's not hard, but it's having your people in place. I've never had to go change a toilet at 2 a.m. or anything like that, but I have people I can call. You might have to pay a little more, but maintaining that kind of arm's length, but also knowing your tenants helps because you're ensuring that they're getting the right people to fix it the first time. They don't have to call in on work to be there or anything like that. But it gives you that peace of mind to kind of either look for the next deal or maintain the peace at home. So self-managing isn't hard. The times I needed some listing help, you've been able to help. Some lease placement. So it's knowing the resources that are out there and just using it and making sure that those people are always on your call list when you're figuring out a situation or coming across that scenario.
Gotcha. So for the person whose portfolio is not in place to be able to hire a property manager yet, so vetting those maintenance people, I know maintenance could be a little bit different than full-blown contracting. How are you able to find and vet those people, especially knowing that you have a family-like relationship with those tenants?
Yeah, referrals really.
Okay.
Either they're people that I've worked with on full renovations or smaller renovations, or they're a buddy or a friend. And, you've got to have that list of 4 to 5 people you can call because, again, I'm not going to try to ask my main contractor to leave a $100,000 job to come help me with a $1,000 job order, So you go to your people first, you ask them if they're available, and then you kind of move down your list. But you can never have there's always room to add people to your roster. And so if it's a newer person, I'll try to give them a first crack once or twice just so I can kind of get their rhythm. Are they going to go pick up the materials for me? Do I need to call Lowe's and have it ready? Are they going to ask for gas? Are they going to be available during holidays? All of that kind of factors into what's happening. And then you have to know the situation that's actually unfolding with the tenant to know who to call. So, it's about keeping the bench full.
Yep. Tell us a story. You mentioned Arkansas. You mentioned some other spots, including Baton Rouge. What led you to kind of start spiraling out away from, where home is? How did that happen?
Yeah. It's probably not the most popular opinion, but right around 2022, I work full-time in disaster management. So I am always going to where hurricanes are, floods. So our job is to be where it's terrible. So I am always kind of that mindset where what could happen? And you start seeing these insurance premiums kind of creep up. And I am very risk averse, as weird as that sounds, but I got very paranoid about what that meant long term if another Katrina were to happen here. You start looking at your portfolio, and I say portfolio where is all my money and where's my wealth? And 75% of it, 80% of it was in real estate. And it's okay, I don't think New Orleans will ever go away, but what can I withstand a 10-year period where another Katrina happens and they don't come back as much, or the insurance rates rise too high? Am I too leveraged in New Orleans? So we kind of had a serious talk about like what my fears were based on what I do, which is sometimes irrational. But so we sold off a good bit of our portfolio here, and then started to look for states and markets that were steady, that were landlord friendly, that had a diverse economy. State governments, capitals were always like a big piece, because bigger cities mean more contractors. It's not like Billy Bob and his truck are going to be the one person helping you. I've got options, and more property managers, and a stronger tenant rental demand. So we started looking at areas that, okay, it's somewhere I can get within a day if I really need to by car. There's a decent price to rent ratio that we can go after. So we started looking, and we've settled on Little Rock and Jackson, Mississippi as like our feeder cities to kind of like test out our strategy. And you know, it's been really successful. There's been a lot of struggles and pain points. It feels like starting all over again in a lot of ways, but we wanted to go to markets where, if the worst happened and New Orleans took on like a bad situation, there's short drives, and they're similar in infrastructure and style to where I think it would benefit if there was some sort of population movement. So it's strictly on our side. I love New Orleans, and we're not getting out of here, but we wanted to diversify our portfolio, just to kind of be away, not as exposed to insurance rates, not as exposed to hurricanes and floods. So that's really the genesis of the idea.
So with underwriting those other markets, you mentioned you were looking for stability. What were some of the metrics that you guys looked at to measure stability? So you did mention rent ratios. What else did you measure to say this is a good market, that you kind of swiped out all the other ones and ended up landing with the two that you found?
Yeah, I mean, we had probably a list of 4 or 5 cities that we were thinking about investing in, and so we kind of just did some checking online to see like what the real estate groups were looking like in that area. Like, was there a lot of activity? Were there people that we can leverage to, you know, help us when we can't physically be there? Entry prices. A lot of these markets have not seen like gigantic spikes in appreciation. So like, not that we think Jackson, Mississippi is going to be the next Austin, Texas, but the prices are very stable. There's big university populations around there that can support, you know, families and government work. There's big healthcare operations in both of these locations, like 2 or 3 major hospitals in each. And like, there's a little bit of a population dip in Jackson, but there's an acceleration in Little Rock, and you know, Jackson's 3.5 hours down the road if we really need to get there. That was like a big key for us. So we kind of found pockets within these cities that we really liked. We met with real estate agents, local investors, contractors, trying to build that pipeline again. And you know, this time we actually had a portfolio of, you know, 13, 14 rental properties and, you know, 12 flips under our belt. So we weren't like just some, again, a punk kid, like trying to make a name for ourselves. So, we looked at everything that was landlord friendly, that had a really good cap rate. I mean, one of the first property we got, we purchased for like, and again, it needed a lot of work, but we were in it for $110, and now it rents for $1,900 a month. So, you know,
which market is that?
That's in Jackson.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the latest one we did in Little Rock, that was an acquisition price, I think, of $130, and now it's renting out for $2,400. It's a duplex. So. Yeah.
So you kind of added another layer of challenges by doing it even further out. I mean, Baton Rouge is one monster, but Little Rock, Arkansas is something totally different. Yeah. So now what does the project management experience look like? Because you can't just drive over the bridge now from downtown if the contractor isn't answering the phone. Yeah. So what does that look like now to kind of quality control the entire project? Yeah,
I mean, in both of these markets, we have people that we could call. Like, it might be a stretch of a call, be like, hey, good to talk to you. I haven't talked to you in a year, but like, can you go check on this for me, please, 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 please? It's setting up like you have some people on the ground that you can call in a pinch. It's getting to know investors that maybe aren't doing the same thing you're doing, but they know who to connect you with. Property managers have been a big help in a lot of that. But it's really like developing your team and just trusting them. A lot of leverage on technology and videos, and we have some people that'll go take pictures and check by properties and stuff. We always do something with, like, when we're doing an inspection on a property, we'll usually make a deal with the inspector on a property to come stop by 3 months later to see how the progress is and see if those issues have truly been addressed, bring up anything else, just to kind of circle back. It's just setting up your team and trusting. Like the latest one we did in Little Rock, I've never seen it in person. So it's a whole different ball game that we're trying to experiment with. And so far it's working. But stay tuned. I don't, who knows?
It was been the biggest the biggest difference with New Orleans, Arkansas, and Jackson, besides just insurance risk and costs? What do you notice? Yeah,
well, the insurance is super cheap. The difficulties again are finding quality labor that's reliable. It's trying to make sure I know the nuances of neighborhoods. Like here, I know where in Broadmoor I want to be. In Little Rock, I don't know where Broadmoor is, and I'm only using like real estate agents, investors to kind of give me the zip codes that they look at, trying to understand the local politics and how the permitting process works. So always a challenging game, but it's getting to know the right people ahead of time and then using them to help you succeed. So it's going to cost a little more, but you don't have to have eyes on it all the time. You have to kind of trust your people.
Yeah, and we have a couple people in the room that invest long distance. How are you kind of putting buffers in place for the normal things that could even happen here, like theft, break-ins, theft from the contractors, things like that? Are there placeholders in place, or you just feel like it's just been a luck of the draw?
I wish I could tell you I have like this like process for everything, but getting to know new people and new players in markets, you're kind of putting yourself out there. On the last deal we did, we had a contractor, and I normally never do down payments. I know it's like a faux pas, but he did 2 jobs for us. First, did great work. On the third job, which was a little bit of a foundation tweak, he asked for some upfront money for materials and jetted. We never heard from him. So I mean, we're not experts. We're not, we're going to get burned just as other people do. You kind of have to take some of those risks in a new market where you don't know everybody, and just, make sure it's not big chunks or putting yourself overexposed.
Yeah.
We're human, and I'm not a guru, so there's a lot of errors and dumb mistakes that we make. It's part of it.
So tell us about the insurance. I think a lot of us want to know how big of a difference, whether it's night and day or we just talking a few percentages, versus New Orleans versus Arkansas and Mississippi. What does the insurance look like?
I mean, on a lot of these properties, our annual premium's $1,300-$1,400, versus here it was $4,000 or $5,000 for some of them, and if that's not including flood, but it's substantial. Again, that comes with it's not just a $3,000 in pocket. Like the property here would appreciate a lot quicker than it would there. Really what we look for is steady cash flow. Again, we underwrite these deals to where the worst case scenario is going to happen. You plan for rain, hope for sunshine every time. And then, in like just even here in New Orleans, like we cash flowed on all of our rental properties enough to where we could absorb a good bit of the increase. And we still do that now, but you have to assume that everything's going to go wrong, buffer your deals, and lean heavily on that depreciation.
Yep. So what's your finance background? What's the percentage you kind of budget for insurance increase? What's kind of your rule of thumb when you're underwriting deals? You expect it to go up by what percent?
I mean, if we're playing it conservatively and assuming the worst is going to happen, we kind of keep it level with the appreciation. So like if you think the property is going to appreciate 2 to 3%, insurance is going to go right up with it, maybe even more. we always buffer in CapEx, maintenance. If it's a 2 to 5 unit, we're taking care of the lawn. I don't want any tenants getting in fights about not upkeep. You know, anything that you could think of conservatively, we put it in there. And that's why our numbers oftentimes don't work with a lot of wholesalers, because we're trying to make sure we buy it right on the front end and we stick to our buy box.
And what is the buy box now from 2018 until now with that experience? For New Orleans, what's the buy box look like today?
So our typical buy is between 1 to 5 units, 1980 or newer, at least 2 bathrooms. That's kind of like a big thing we do now, because the 1.5, just when you talk about exit strategies and resale, 1.5 and 2 is night and day difference. Every property we purchase, we want to have some equity to be built in. So our range is usually based on the purchase price. We want at least 30 to 50% of renovation costs. So we want, like, if it's a $100,000 property, we want to put at least $50,000 into it to kind of build that equity. We prefer pier and beam versus slab. Just ran into some issues, preference, I guess. No HOAs, absolutely not. And then maybe like 2 max, like big CapEx things. So like if it needs a new roof and new electrical, like we're not going to do any more full guts. I think we're kind of, I know there's a lot more money to be made in those situations. It's just we're kind of stretched thin with time, so we focus where we can. And then, you know, usually it has, like, the biggest indicator for us always is the 1% rule, and we're usually leaning more like on the 1.3, 1.4% rule. Making sure, again, we build in as much buffer as we can with the rent to acquisition and rehab costs.
And what's the 1% rule?
Yeah, so it's usually used by people as a way to find deals and then dive further into that analysis. But essentially, the property needs to rent for at least 1% of your all-in cost. So if you buy a property for $100,000, the rent has to be 1%. And the idea there is that the note on that mortgage plus some of your expenses, maintenance, vacancy, all of that is kind of covered. With the rates where they are today, you have to kind of go a little bit above that. And a lot of people think it's hard to find, but it's not if you're buying those properties that have the as is or need work. You can kind of build in your equity there. So everything we buy is usually about like 1.3, 1.4.
Gotcha. By being in different markets, have you found maybe a difference with the approach to insurance agents versus here and everywhere else? Is there some negotiating leverage that you've been able to uncover to try to
On
get
insurance?
to get it down here from versus what you've seen everywhere else?
I mean, like some places here, if you have a new roof, you get a deal. But I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. Maybe there's not as, I don't know if there's not as many carriers, but you don't have to go searching like 7 or 8 different agents to find a rate that works. Whereas here, you know, every carrier, I mean, Citizens is probably the biggest underwriter here. So there's not like any wind and hail only or, you know, weird exclusions that you have to worry about. It's kind of how it used to be. You know, not to say it's not going to get that way, because it might all go south, but you know, it's nothing particular in negotiation or leverage.
Yep. And we're about to take questions in a little bit. So from 2018, not having kids, and not here we are, fast forward 2025. You guys have twins.
Yeah.
What does life look like with managing projects, family, work now? I know you mentioned delegating. So now what does that look like to make sure all of the balls stay juggled up in the air and don't fall?
Well, a lot of coffee. You know, I mean, really and truly, it's the rental side alone has given us a little more hands-off approach, and then since we had the kids and we liquidated some of our New Orleans portfolio, we moved a little bit into the private lending side, which has been a good way to keep your foot active in the game and still do like deal analysis and underwriting and still see some money coming in the door every month. So that has been a good, real piece of this. We kind of gave up flipping for a year and a half and have really focused on our private lending. So that's been a big help in getting a little bit more passive with our time. And then it's just, you can't do it unless, thank you, Kaylin, for, being part of this journey. She did not like it at first and shit on every deal I would bring to her. But, we've kind of got to the point where she got to know some of the property and making sure that she was on board with everything. And not just on board, but like understanding where the appreciation's going, the mortgage payoff, like how that all looks in the long term and what that means. It's like every property is like a year less that I have to work to retire, or maybe a year less that she has to work to retire. So every deal, and we're big advocates on slow and steady. Every deal kind of brings us closer to where we want to be. So understanding that, like, we had twins out the gate, and that was hell for a long time. I love them to death, but like, I want to make sure that they're set. But I also want to make sure that we're putting our money in assets that are appreciating and that can stand up, not just, squander away with inflation. So, understanding the mindset that the rentals and the properties and the assets are the long game is the most important mindset switch. The flips, like, it's good money, but like you're at the mercy of the market and the conditions that present itself, and it's a grind. There's a lot of people in here that are doing 12 to 13 flips at a time, and I know we already talked about it today, but it gives me anxiety to the max just thinking about that. I mean, you got to be really on top of your game and special at what you do to be able to handle that. So, as we move back into flips in the next year or so, we're excited about that rush and that thrill that you get. But like, this to us is a part of the bigger diversification portfolio, I guess, in life, and trying to get to that time where I can tell my boss to kick rocks, And
what is, before we take questions, you mentioned private money lending for the wholesalers in the room or the flippers in the room. Now, what is kind of like your lending box of what you're looking for as far as a borrower?
Yeah. So I'll say first and foremost, personal integrity and getting to know the person is the most important part. Like, cold call lending, never going to happen. I have to know your resume enough. I have to know you as an individual enough to like trust that I'm not going to get, left holding the bag.
Yeah.
We always require a personal guarantee on all our notes and a mortgage position on the lien. And then, depending on what the deal itself is, what your plan is, like, is it a 1 to 2 month deal? Is it a 6 month deal? How long is my money going to be locked up? And then what the rates and the terms are on the deal, that kind of limits it. We're not like full scale lenders. This is just like a temporary like piece of the strategy for us, but it's allowed us, while we've had kids and, more 3 a.m. mornings that I can imagine, to like still be part of the game and still kind of keep those tools sharp, all while managing our rental portfolio.
Yep. So what are you guys working on right now? How can the group help you? What's kind of the goals for this year and beyond?
Yeah, I think we're gonna probably do 1 or 2 more flips this year. We're kind of like getting to the point where I think a lot of the jitters on not interest rates, but mortgage rates have kind of subsided. I think people are starting to like realize like this is it. We're not going back to the sub 5. So I think you're seeing a lot of people kind of get back into it a little bit. So we'll probably do 1 or 2 flips this year. We'll probably add another 1 to 2 rentals this year. And then, I would assume probably continue the lending for maybe 2 or 3 deals. Mm-hmm. We'll see. But like, again, like I'm not 10 deals at a time. I'm not the person trying to sell you a book. I'm just trying to like do what's best for our family, and real estate has been like the vehicle that like makes the most sense, and you can see the appreciation and change in value like that. So, you know, we've got a lot of other irons in the fire, but real estate's always going to be a major part of our plan.
Good stuff. So in summary, for the wholesalers that's in the room, what are you looking for? What type of deal should they be texting to you?
Yeah. If I haven't met you then, I'd love to meet you. But again, like our buy box is, you know, generally 3.2, 2.2, needs a decent amount of work, but not too much work. And B minus, C plus neighborhood is kind of like what we always go for. Nothing too flashy, but nothing too, you know, crappy. Somewhere you can bring your mom and be comfortable, you know, like that she's going to be okay and she's going to feel safe. That's kind of like our parameters. And we look for long-term rentals. It doesn't have to be like the nicest house with all the bells and whistles. It's got to be sturdy. It's got to have a great foundation, good bones. And it's going to have enough room to where a family can come in and really plant roots, and you can plant with them. So, you know, no major roads, no heavy trafficked areas. But yeah, I mean, happy to show you my numbers. I'll gladly walk anybody through my process. And, you know, I think that's probably the most important piece is like reach out and ask questions. I would not be anywhere near where I am had I not like just swallow my pride and say like, can you show me how you do this? Let me just kind of mirror your deals, and can you show me how the back end works on the numbers? I mean, there are so many people out there that are willing to help, and there's some friends that I like beg to come, like maybe come to this event or like come look at this real estate deal with me. I think you really benefit. And a lot of people talk like they want to be involved, but not everyone shows up. And that's okay. Like that's your thing. I don't want to ever, you know, force anyone to do this, but like the people that are active and involved, like pick their brain, because this is something they're so passionate about. Yeah, they're making money, but like just learn and absorb, be that fly on the wall.
Yep, and that invitation is for realtors also, not just for wholesalers.
Oh,
so
for
if
realtors
that have listens that fit that, please reach out to Steven. How can we get in touch with you? Because this is for YouTube also. So for our people watching in Arkansas and Mississippi, how can they send those deals to you?
Yeah, you could reach me probably by email is easiest. Steven, it's PH. I don't know why my parents did that. STEPHEN, T as in Tom, Sewell, SEWELL, Gmail. On Instagram, we try to start like a social media thing. It's not really my thing, but it's at Part-Time Investing, where we kind of like show some of the properties we're working on. And when you're in rentals, it's not like there's not a lot of content there. You know, it's not like I could show you my annual inspection and people paid rent on time, but it's like it's not a sexy flip that I'm doing every couple of months. So there's not a whole lot there, and I'm not big on that whole social media thing. But you can reach me there, or Facebook. Just reach out to me personally.
Yeah, awesome. Questions from the audience.
Are you reading anything right now?
I wish I had some like cool book for you to read or recommendation. There's a new FEMA policy that came out related to public assistance. That's a thriller, 271 pages. But no, I mean, I've done like the basic books, like, you know, your Rich Dad Poor Dad and the like. But I'm more like just internet articles about like economic trends and mortgage rate forecasting and population moves. So there's no like 2025 like new me book that I'm reading. So no, unfortunately. My wife's reading some like fairy tale stuff, so I'm sure she'd be able to talk to you about that.
Good stuff. Next question.
So I purchased my first rental. I went in there with my wife. We now have our own home. We have one rental. And so my question is, you know, obviously I'm trying to figure out what's next, right? When you look at rentals, you're looking at, you know, 20% down. You talk about cash out refinance. Can you tell me a little bit about when you first got into that first rental, you said, okay, I'm ready for that next one. What was that process look like? And are you always looking at 20% down, or have you been able to do different things because of your network?
Yeah, I've been there where like cash is tight, especially in those first couple of deals when you're like, I don't know if I can muster up 20%, and then I also got to do some rehab, and then there's also like the closing costs that always catch you. So I mean, our strategy initially was always 2 to 3 flips, then a rental. So that always had like a pocket of cash that we could pull from, and it allowed us to like slowly build the rental side while keeping the money flowing on the flip side. So yeah, the deals that we buy now are still like 15 to 20% down LTV, unless you're doing like a DSCR. And then the cash out refinance side is usually where we pull everything back out. So again, we go for those deals that you can like build in your own equity. So, you know, you buy it for 120, you put 50 grand into it, you're all in 170, but now the property's worth 240, and your cash out refi amount you can pull kind of makes you whole in a lot of those ways. So, you know, I don't have a personal recommendation for you, but I would say like, be careful on pulling out too much equity on the cash out refis. I've gotten burned by that, where a bank offers you, oh, you can pull out 70 grand. I'm like, hell yeah, we're going to Harrah's, you know? But then, you know, interest rates pop up, homeowners rates go up. Your property tax is always going to go up. There's something that happens, and now you're underwater $200-300 a month, whereas you were cash flowing like a king. So just pull out what you can when you can, but don't overdo it, because that'll burn you. And then maybe consider looking at flips or some other kind of way. Right now, we're using the lending side to kind of put together a down payment for our next property, but also like using that to max out like our IRA accounts, you know? So just like trying to be, all of this is not to like build a name for ourselves, but it's trying to stop working as fast as possible and like get a homestead and like live off the chickens and stuff. You know what I mean? So I don't have like, I mean, you can wholesale. I've wholesale deals before. It's the people that do it are truly talented, because I'm not very good at it. I tried for a long time. I think I've wholesaled 2 deals, but I mean, that's a great way if you don't have a lot of capital to kind of still be actively underwriting and build up some money to put down, or consider partnering on a deal. You know, there's a lot of people with money and don't know what to do with it. And if you do a lot of the sweat equity, you can kind of really get yourself into a property and kind of build out and scale from there.
No. Good question. Next question. I have one. What happened with HOAs that you want to stay away from so much?
It's nothing happened to me. I just like, I know people that deal with HOAs, and like there's some benefits, you know, like everyone brings their trash can in by like 2 days after, and you know, you don't like, can't have, you know, unsightly things outside. Like I get that lifestyle, but like from an investor standpoint, if I'm putting my money in investing in a location, and Karen's going to tell me what I can and can't do with my property, like, and it's not only that, sometimes it's a tenant that's doing something, and now you have to like kind of play good cop, bad cop. And there's already so many hurdles you have to deal with the cities and permitting and making sure easements are correct and playing by the rules. I just don't want another layer of someone trying to tell me what we can't do. So I've never had an HOA. I know people that have really gotten burned by them, so I steer clear.
Awesome. And as we wrap up, you mentioned doing this part-time. You say your Instagram is @PartTimeInvestor. You mentioned leveraging wholesalers to get that deal flow. Steven, raise your hand. So Steven, Homebuyer Louisiana, wholesaling organization in the city. If you're not familiar with them, we jumped in on the lease side with Lease Code. What's the reason that you would outsource the leasing portion when you have the time to do it?
Well, I've self-leased and listed properties. You get a lot of entries, a lot of like, hey, is this still available? Hey, like I'm interested. I could put my money down tomorrow. It's like, slow your roll. I don't, you know, there's a lot of vetting there, and it takes a lot of time. And then also, you want to make sure you have the right candidate. It's really about the right type of person, the family that you're trying to invest with, and that arm's length away from the actual placement kind of gives you a little more. It's like, I don't want to have to tell 40 people that, like, I don't want to have to try to schedule viewings. I don't want to have to be there to answer questions. Will you accept this? Well, what if I'm late on my rent for 2 months? Can you still hold it for me? Like, it's just a lot of, like, I feel for a lot of people in situations, but, like, I feel like my time and my, like, scheduling can be better put to, like, looking at a new deal, or, like, honestly just, like, going to kick it with my kids, like, and there are people that are way better at it than I am. You are very much better at it than I am.
Thank you.
So, like, for me, it's the rental side. I'm trying to, like, get out of as much of the day-to-day stuff as I can, and I'm just not very good at it.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, everybody put your hands together for Steve and Sewell. Thank you so much. That was good, brother. That was good. So you got time to hang out? Is the babysitter there till midnight?
We can go a little bit.
Okay, all right, good deal. So Steve, take it away.